morning, everybody. Whether you are here in person, and look at everybody who is here in person or watching at home, it is so good to be with all of you this morning. It is so good for all of us to be together. Do you know what I would like to be more like? I would like to be more like a tall, strong tree. I would like to be more like a tree that has deep roots that nourish it, even when the weather is hot and dry, but also keep it from blowing over during terrible storms. Because it's important to have things that nourish our spirits even during life's dry times and help us stay rooted during life's difficult times. I'd like to be like a tree whose trunk and branches are flexible and bend and sway in strong winds, because it's important to bend and sway rather than break when things aren't blowing your way. I'd like to be like a tree that is home to birds and squirrels and whose leafy branches offer shade to people on a hot day, because it's important to live for something more than ourselves. And I'd like to be like a tree that isn't afraid of letting go of its leaves in the fall, because it's important to realize that life and death are part of one another, and sometimes we have to experience a loss for new growth to occur. And that's why I'd like to be more like a tall, strong tree. Come, my friends, with our hearts open to both the challenges and the possibilities that this new day, this new week, this new month bring, with our hearts open to all that is within us and between us and all around us on this beautiful fall morning. Come, let us worship together. Wonderful speech this morning. Our children's choir, our chapel choir, is singing for us.
This is my trunk, I'm a tall, tall tree. In the springtime the blossoms grow on me. They
be seated. Yeah. Let's show our children's choir a little bit more appreciation. Yay.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. Will those of you here in person please stand as you are able for our chalice lighting? If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light it with us at this time. As we kindle the spirit of this flame, we recommit ourselves to the nurturing spirits of one another and the common good of the world we share. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home.
Daughter Ada lighting our chalice this morning, and Jean Marie is now going to lead us in our next hymn, so please remain standing.
What? What is happening? Yeah. Not really.
We'll sing it first in unison, and then in parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll keep going until we get the signal stop.
Morning has come, night is away. Rise with the sun and welcome the day. Rise with the sun and welcome the day. Morning has come, night is away. Rise with the sun and welcome the day. Morning has come, night is away. Rise with the sun and welcome the day.
Wonderful.
If you're visiting us for the first time this morning, I offer you a special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. If you're visiting us for the first time in person, I invite you to stop by our welcome stand in the foyer if you haven't already done so. Fill out our visitor form, get a name tag, and you can pick up one of our pamphlets to find out about UUFR and Unitarian Universalism. If you're visiting us online, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at www.ufr.org/visitor form. If you do this, you'll start receiving our weekly e-newsletter called The Chalice. UUF members can also pick up one of our new business cards at the welcome stand. If you're ever talking to family, neighbors, coworkers, or friends and want an easy way to get them to find out more about UUFR, it's useful to have one of these cards. You can pick them up at the welcome stand. Now, I hope all of you will read the chalice you received by email on Thursday about everything happening here around UUFR. Please make sure to check out information about our blood drive this Saturday, our upcoming Living the Pledge to End Racism workshops, and our We Count What Matters BIPOC census. And as a special event today, we're having a special Holy Bowly event. I think I said that right. Yes. Immediately following the service downstairs in Founders Hall. All are welcome. Everyone is welcome at this no-charge event. I now invite you to meet and greet your neighbor. Morning. Please make a special effort to say hi to one of them as well.
Let's come back together, folks. The sooner you guys come back together, the sooner you get to go downstairs for the potluck. And that Holy Bowly event is our Holy Bowly potluck. And so it is welcome to all. And so please join us downstairs, especially if you're visiting us for the first time. So if you have empty seats close to you, will you please raise your hand? Okay, as always, the front, we have lots of space in the front row. Okay, and some other spaces scattered around. Very good.
I would like to share with you this morning a story about a man named Nasruddin. Nasruddin is a well-known Sufi character hailing from Turkey, and his stories are always a little bit funny with a little bit of wisdom too. Now, Nasruddin loved having long conversations about the big questions of life. He liked to think to himself in his house about how to be a good person. What is the meaning of all of this? And whether he should attend the mosque with the best sermons or the mosque with the best potlucks. Now, one day Nasruddin heard that there was a famous philosopher visiting the village. This famous philosopher had spoken with many kings and queens and had become very wealthy from all the gifts he had received from his royal patrons. Nasruddin couldn't help himself. He ran over to the famous philosopher and got down on his knees to beg for the opportunity to have a long conversation about the big questions of life with this man. Now, the philosopher didn't really know if he wanted to spend time with Nasruddin. This famous philosopher was used to wealthy, royal people, and Nasruddin was neither of those. Still, the philosopher wanted to appear generous, and so he agreed to come visit Nasruddin at 1 o'clock at his house. Now, Nasruddin was so excited. He immediately went off to prepare and thought the best way to welcome his guest would be to have a nice meal. And so he went down to the pond so he could fish for some lunch. The problem is that when Nasruddin began fishing, Nasruddin began wondering. And when he began wondering about the big questions of life, he got a little bit forgetful. 1 o'clock rolled around, and the famous philosopher came to Nasruddin's house and knocked on the door, and no one appeared. The famous philosopher waited a few moments and then knocked again. And no one came. This was unacceptable. The famous philosopher was never kept waiting. He was outraged, and he decided that he would take his marker and write in big letters on Nasruddin's door, "Dumb goof." And he left. Now, Nasruddin, a little bit later, came back home and looked at his door and saw what was written and remembered his appointment. He ran straight to the philosopher and again got on his knees and said, "I am so sorry." He explained, "I completely forgot until I saw that you had written your name on my door." Now, when the philosopher wrote "big goof," I don't think he was referring to himself. He was trying to insult Nasruddin. But sometimes when we are really angry and we react badly, it says more about who we are than those around us. Thank you.
Let's give one more round of applause to our actors this morning. I would like to invite all of you to participate in a ritual of forgiveness and a ritual of acceptance. This is a ritual we do every time at just about this time of year, usually on the first or second Sunday of October. And this is a time that we ask ourselves if there is something that we have done wrong in the past year, something that we regret and feel guilty about. It's also a time to ask ourselves if there is somebody that we need to forgive in our lives. Somebody else, or maybe ourselves. It's also a time to ask ourselves if there is something about ourselves or our lives or the world that we finally just need to accept, something that we truly wish were different, but something that we don't have the power to change. And so it's making us troubled or even bitter. What does it mean to forgive and accept? It doesn't mean excusing. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't always mean the same thing as reconciling. Forgiveness and acceptance means letting go of something from our past. It means letting go of our hurts, our humiliation, our anger, our bitterness, or if we're trying to forgive ourselves, our guilt. Somebody once said, forgiveness means letting go of our hopes and dreams for a different yesterday. We forgive and accept so we won't be haunted by the past, so we can live more fully in the present and imagine a better future for ourselves. This is how it works. We have 3 tables at the front of the sanctuary, and there are special pieces of paper and pens at each table. I'm going to ask Dana and Sasha actually to move to these tables now. We're going to forgive Dana for moving a little slowly. And let's go ahead and light the candles. So if there is something that you have done in your life which you have not forgiven yourself yet, write that down on one of our sheets of paper. And if there is somebody in your life that you haven't forgiven yet but want to forgive, write that person's name down on the sheet of paper. And if there is something about you or your life or even about the world that you just haven't accepted yet but think it might be good to, write that down too. And it's okay to draw pictures too. And I get this question every year, so I'll answer it now. Everybody only gets one sheet of paper. And after you get your sheet of paper, fold it in half and put it in the chalice flame. And Dana and Sasha, let's show people how to do that now. And this is special paper. And you'll notice that we have special fireproof burn mats this year. Last year, Lewis had to forgive me for burning holes in our good tablecloths. So even if you drop it on the silver burn mat, it won't burn. However, if it's a little bit scary, and if you want Dana or me or Sasha to put your paper into the flame, we can do that. So, here's something that's important to remember. Forgiveness takes time, sometimes years. So if you write down the same thing this year as you wrote down last year, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That just means sometimes it takes a long time to forgive things. But remember this as well. I know that the harder that we try to forgive ourselves or somebody else, the less successful we are. The harder we try, the worse we do it. Forgiveness is not something we can will. It's only something that we can open ourselves to experiencing. So as you put your piece of paper into the flame, I encourage you to say, may my heart be open to forgiveness and acceptance. Let's practice that together. Repeat that after me. May my heart be open to forgiveness and acceptance. Let's begin. Let's let the youngest among us go first. And I encourage you to form multiple lines at each table. come forward now, too.
join me now in a litany of atonement. And after I speak, please sing back to me, "We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love." For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. At this time, we are going to ask for our children to go down in peace. If you have a preschool or kindergartner, we ask the parents to escort them down to the Sunshine Circle there in the space. If you are a first through fifth grader, we ask you, when we start singing, to go in the back and find your banner. There's first and second grade, and third through fifth grade. If you are in middle school, that means sixth through eighth grade, you'll meet Ken over in this back corner over there to go to team cake. And any high schoolers, we ask you to stay in the sanctuary, and we'll have you through after service at 11:30. Let's go down.
Just a word about an announcement I made earlier. I mentioned that the blood drive is Saturday. Actually, the blood drive is on Friday. Please note that correction. Everything we do here at UUFR is only possible because of the generous financial support so many of you provide. It's now time for our offering, so please be generous. Our choir will be singing during the offertory, so please don't use the far aisle, as the choir will be using that. So please, let us begin. You may come forward.
Tired of fighting from deep within this cage. I'm tired of igniting the fuel that is my rage. Take a breath, re-engage. A story that's worth writing begins with a new page. I'm tired of fighting from deep within this cage. I'm tired of igniting the fuel that is my rage. I'm tired of fighting from deep within this cage. I'm tired of fighting the fuel that is my rage. I'm tired of fighting from deep within this cage. I'm tired of fighting the fuel that is my rage. I'm tired of fighting from deep within my rage. I'm tired of fighting the feelings within my rage. I'm tired of fighting the feelings within my rage. A story that's worth writing begins with a new page.
A story that's worth writing begins with a new page.
And can I ask the AV crew to bring me my clicker? Sometimes other people hurt us, sometimes intentionally. Sometimes life disappoints us. Holding on to that hurt and that disappointment for too long hurts us. It's for this reason that we hold our annual ritual of forgiveness and acceptance every year at about this time, to give ourselves the opportunity to create an intention of letting go of these hurts and disappointments. But what about when we ourselves do something, whether unintentionally or sometimes even intentionally, that ends up hurting somebody else in some way? After all, we do sometimes. All of us do, even the best of us. What can we do? And that's what I want to talk about this morning. I want to talk about two different sets of strategies that we might use when we find ourselves in the wrong. The first set of these strategies is by far the more popular one. And I'm calling this first set of strategies how to get away with anything strategies. What are they? If we suspect that we might somehow be in the wrong, but just want to get away with whatever we've done, and we've all been there, the first and easiest thing that we can do when we suspect that we might be the wrong one is distract. Change the subject. Okay, we're going with the magic finger. Okay, AV crew, this means that you guys have to be paying attention to what I'm saying. Distract, change the subject. Did you eat that last piece of pie in the refrigerator last night that I was saving for myself, my wife might ask? Don't we need more blueberries from Costco, I might reply. If you want to see somebody who is skilled in the art of distraction, look no further than your own children. Have you straightened up your room, a parent might ask? You'll never guess what Emily drew in our class that got her in trouble, a child might reply. Of course, the real professionals at this are public figures of any sort. Earlier in my life, I worked as a newspaper reporter and got really good at asking people really direct questions. Later in my life, I took a media training workshop about how to talk with reporters. And the first thing I learned was ignore whatever you are asked and use the opportunity to talk about whatever you want to talk about, which explained a lot of my previous experience as a reporter. But sometimes the focus on us is so intense, it's impossible for us to change the subject. So the next thing we can do is deny. Remember what Bill Clinton famously said and how he said it? I did not have sex with that woman. This was much more effective than later when under oath, he tried to parse the meaning of the word is. The secret is to say something strongly, emphatically, or even angrily enough. And do you know why people do this? It works. Unfortunately, sometimes we get caught red-handed, or with our hand literally in the cookie jar. In that case, the next best thing that we can do is minimize what has happened. We can say things like, it wasn't such a big deal. Or, you're overreacting. And if we can't distract, deny, or minimize, the next best thing we can do is blame somebody else for whatever happened. Maybe even the person we've harmed. Saying something along the lines of, if you had had the good sense not to call me and check in on me to see how I was doing when you knew I was upset, I never would have said those mean, hateful things to you. Now, sometimes, though, things are just clearly 100% our fault and our fault alone. And in those situations, we can make an excuse. And the wonderful thing is that there are so many to choose from. I didn't know. Nobody told me. I was tired. I was stressed. I was upset. I was drinking. I was busy. I couldn't help myself. I didn't have a choice. I was just following the rules. I was just following orders. And then there was the classic, I didn't mean it. And this one works so well because our intentions do matter. At least they matter a lot to me. I would feel very differently depending on whether somebody accidentally stepped on my foot or deliberately stomped on it. Of course, the intentions of our actions aren't the only thing that matter. The impacts of our actions matter too, but if we can focus just on our intentions, we'll be more likely to get away with something, at least in our own minds. And if we can't distract, deny, minimize, blame, or excuse, the last refuge is to justify ourselves. And there are many different ways we can justify ourselves. We can refer to the bad behavior of everybody else, implying that acting morally in some situations is hopelessly naive by saying something along the lines of, Everybody else does it. We can suggest that doing the right thing would have resulted in catastrophic consequences for ourselves, saying things along the lines of, it was either me or him, or if I'd pay my workers a living wage, I'd go bankrupt. Those truly artful in justification, however, always appeal to the greater good, saying things like, I did it for us. I did it for the good of our country. The reputation of the church or the corporation or the country would have suffered irreparable damage. Or even, I did it for God. So, my friends, if you want to get away with something, remember these words: distract, deny, minimize, blame, excuse, and justify. They make up the mantra not only of abusers and criminals, but politicians, CEOs, and of course, so many religious leaders. A lot of successful people use them every day. And so why shouldn't the rest of us? Just to be clear, there are some minor downsides to these strategies. For example, they don't do anything to resolve the guilt we sometimes feel. Here I'm not talking the inappropriate guilt that we sometimes feel as a result of the superhuman, unrealistic expectations of ourselves, which I've learned are quite common among many Unitarian Universalists. Too often I have found many of us would rather feel guilty about something than admit that some things in our life are beyond our control. Rather here I'm talking about the appropriate guilt that we experience when we sometimes do something that hurts somebody, which even the very best of us sometimes do. Using these strategies does nothing to repair broken relationships. Using any of these strategies too often and too well also has the potential to destroy any trusting, loving, caring relationship we have in our lives and leave us estranged from other people to face life completely isolated and alone. The biggest downside, of course, is that we might only not become skilled in using these strategies with others, but become skilled in using them on ourselves, leading us towards a life that is not only lonely and isolated, but is a total lie and inauthentic in every way. As I said, minor downsides that a lot of successful people manage to deal with all the time. As I said earlier, though, there is another set of strategies we can use when we find ourselves in the wrong. But they are far less popular. You almost never see famous, successful people using them. In fact, some of the people who use them most are drunks and addicts. They are loosely based on the writings of the 12th century Jewish theologian Maimonides. So they're not based on modern thinking at all. Worse, they're hard to use. So I mentioned them this morning hesitantly. What are they? Well, they can be thought best as a series of steps about what to do when we find ourselves in the wrong about something. A first step is simply clearly to acknowledge a wrong to ourselves. Like I said, this is hard to do. It's far easier to be a little wishy-washy and say, I feel really bad about this, instead of saying, I did this, and it was wrong. Some people who like these steps say it's also necessary to make a confession to somebody else, not necessarily the person we've harmed. Some people say that until you've admitted a wrongdoing to another person, we really haven't admitted it to ourselves. People sometimes say this helps because our own harsh self-judgment, is so harsh. When we kind of confess our mistakes to somebody else and they don't walk away in total disgust, it can be healing. Confession, it seems, can be good for the soul. A second step is to allow ourselves to feel regrets, at least for a while. On the other hand, it's probably not a good idea to overdo this. In the Jewish tradition, there is a concept of turning. As the psychiatrist Irvin Yalom explains, if one sins and then turns away from sin towards the world and towards fulfillment of some God-given task, one is considered uniquely enlightened, standing above even the most pious holy man. If, on the other hand, one continues to be absorbed with guilt and repentance, then one is considered to be mired in selfishness and baseness. In other words, people who use these steps say we shouldn't wallow in guilt. A third step is figuring out why we did whatever we did and take steps to not repeating our mistake. This is why I think some people like to wallow in their guilt. Wallowing is easy and sometimes even self-satisfying in a way. Change is hard and requires a lot of work. By the way, this is what sometimes annoys me about political liberals and progressives, even though this is my tribe. Sometimes the wallowing to work ratio is really high. A fourth step, if possible, is to right the wrong that we've done. This might mean apologizing to the other person, taking responsibility for what happened, expressing regret, explaining, but not excusing our behavior. Saying something along the lines of, if I had to do it over again, here's what I would have done differently. Sharing what steps we've taken to make sure we would act differently in the future. Making restitution in money or service and asking for, but not demanding, forgiveness. A fifth step is to affirm our own worth, dignity, and potential. It is to affirm that even though we are imperfect, as each of us is, that we are each still worthy of love. It is to affirm that even though we have done something we feel badly about, that this does not necessarily define who we are. And this does not negate the possibility that we indeed have the ability to do good things in the future. But what if we do all of these things and still feel bad? The 6 steps may surprise you, even more than all the others, because the 6th step is to pray. To pray that we may experience forgiveness for ourselves within our own hearts. Now, I know that we as Unitarian Universalists have various understandings of God and prayer. But I also believe that there is something universal in the human experience that might be called grace, that is possible for us to experience no matter what our religious beliefs. Listen for a moment to what the Protestant theologian Paul Tillich wrote about grace. Grace, he wrote, strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of a meaningless and empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we have violated another life, a life which we loved or from which we are estranged. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. It strikes us when year after year the longed-for perfection of life does not appear. When the old compulsion reign within us, as they have for decades. When despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness. If that happens to us, we experience grace. After such an experience, we may not be better than before, and we may not believe more than before, but everything is transformed. This is how I think we might understand this step. Simply letting ourselves be open to the experience of a light breaking into our darkness. Nothing too woo-woo about that. As I had us all say earlier, just saying to ourselves, may I be open, may my heart be open to the experience of forgiveness and acceptance. Nothing more than that. So 2 sets of strategies for us to consider. The easy, popular ones, distracting, denying, minimizing, blaming, excusing, and justifying. And the more difficult, less popular, and admittedly less fun ones. Acknowledging our wrong, feeling regrets, figuring out how to do better, apologizing and making amends, acknowledging our own worth, dignity, and potential, and finally, opening our hearts to the possibility of forgiving ourselves. I'll leave it to all of you to decide which may lead to a fuller, richer, deeper, more satisfying experience of life. So may it be. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is Amazing Grace. It is number 205 in your gray hymnals and up on the screen. We are only going to sing the first 3 verses. Will you please stand as you're able? Please be seated. As we end this time of worship together, may we do so with ever more love for one another, with ever more gratitude for this precious, precious gift of life that we share among ourselves this very day, with ever more peace in our hearts, with ever more hope for our own lives in this world we share. Amen.